We are here.
Yes, we are.
We are at episode number, I think you've been on, this is the fifth time.
I think
So that's
so.
cool.
In the Fiverr
Welcome.
Club.
Congratulations. And the original concept of this was I was thinking at the end of our 3 episode run last week
Which
that
was great, by the way. That
that
was a lot of
was,
fun.
you've got to have a trilogy. And it was sort of, in a way, like an anthology, where each of the episodes were connected, but I think you didn't have to necessarily listen to all of them. You could listen to them individually. But I did realize it was within an hour after we ended our last episode, like, crap, I don't think we ever actually tied the last one back to the first one. So there was a clear connection.
Yeah. One of my cousins actually listened to it like 3 and then went to 1 and then listened to 2. And I was like, that's
3, 1, 2.
some good counting. And I was like, that's good counting right there, my friend. Nice job. But they made sense regardless. Okay. But the one thing he said, he was like, so you guys just like talk. There's no music, there's no transitions, you just talk. And I was like, that's a podcast. Yeah. Like, why? What is hard here? But
yeah, it's actually though, like it's tough to define exactly what it is, because people often, particularly parents, older relatives, will be like, okay, so you do interviews. And I'm like, well, I don't do interviews, because it's like, I'm not like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, now you give me an answer, now I'm going to ask you another question. It's just people are unfamiliar with this concept because it's not really done often, where people just dialogue.
Yeah, there's a lot of like story time podcasts, which I enjoy, but then there's conversation ones, and I think this definitely would fall under a conversation one. Mm-hmm. And it works well because, you know, it just does. If it didn't, you wouldn't have had, how many episodes you're at now? 41, 42?
Yeah, this has got to be 42.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't keep coming back.
That's good. That's a good thing when people come back.
No, I love recording the podcasts. I have a great time every time I'm here, and looking forward to being able to like go to the studio.
Yeah, that's gonna happen again. And,
yeah.
You know, like I said before, I do have some mics that I picked up, and I've never used them, so I hope that I can actually start to use those. I've gotten great at using Zoom, but you know, people are just used to the decor of my room now. This is not an official studio.
Well, I mean, it's nice. I mean, you've got more than I've got going on, because I actually turn my whole computer because I'm redoing my room right now, and it is just, it's not bad. It's just evident that there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And like my mirror is over there, and it will just reflect the fact that organization is happening slowly. Mm-hmm. So I just turn it and then kind of sit up against the window, and it's all good.
I generally just push the stuff that's disorderly onto the floor so it's out of the frame. That's kind of how it works. Okay, so the topic of the first episode was resurgent white supremacy and white nationalism.
Yes.
And domestic terrorism, things like that. And then we moved into setting up over the course of the 20th century for the military-industrial complex, which is the third episode.
Yes.
And I had said somewhere, probably in the first episode, okay, the military-industrial complex, our next topic, actually relates to this, you know, white nationalist, white supremacist thing.
Right.
And that connection really is through, we had talked about how when the Soviet Union collapsed back in the 90s, there was this sort of power vacuum where we didn't have a major enemy anymore, and new ideologies started to trickle in, neoliberalism, neoconservatism. And neoliberalism is really the ideology that came to embody what people on the radical right would call the New World Order, which is like, you know, a more cosmopolitan worldview of like, you know, we're all nations, and let's have the United Nations be more of the international governing body, and sort of ceding your autonomy in a sense to a higher government, world government.
Yeah, I also look at it as almost like pseudo utilitarianism,
Hmm. But can
like
you explain? Because I don't know much about utilitarianism.
like misguided kind of utilitarianism. To my understanding, is something that's really a generalized conceptualization of being for like, which sounds ridiculous, but like it would appeal to everyone.
Mhm.
Instead of saying like I'm going to write the next great American novel, someone was like I'm going to write the next great utilitarian novel, and I was like, okay, you rock on with your bad self. But
That sounds like very bureaucratic and boring. A utilitarian
yes,
novel.
yes, it sounds like a handbook
Yeah.
to build something boring.
I
Like it doesn't sound.
say that again. That you skipped and your voice turned robotic.
That's my secret. I'm a robot. Uh, no, it sounds like a manual to building something. I don't know why, but when I think utilitarian, I think of grills. Couldn't tell you why,
Yeah.
but that's the first thing that pops into my head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in common parlance, it's just like it's selecting things based on their utility rather than like any emotional or aesthetic aspect. Which
Yeah.
I get that, and I think that I've heard utilitarianism as an ideology in relation to morals, like um, any policy that will cause harm to the fewest amount of people is utilitarian, I believe.
It's like very path of least resistance, but least interesting,
Yeah.
remotely thought provoking. Um, anything utilitarian that I've read has kind of, in one ear and right out the other. Maybe I haven't found the right stuff yet, and if I haven't, let me know.
Okay.
But
I've heard the name Jeremy Bentham. I just don't know anything about him. He was like the founder of the idea utilitarianism. Sounds extremely boring. Maybe it's not.
I mean, I haven't read enough of it to know, but
Mhm.
I find that more provocative literature in the sense of like it has either a function or an argument or something instead of just this
Sure.
is much more fascinating and something that I want to devote my time to,
Hmm.
as opposed to something that effectively makes no sense, or not makes no sense, but just doesn't have there's no narrative really.
Yes.
The essential thing is you need a narrative.
Okay. So essentially, um, the New World Order concept is really something that you'll see heavily ingrained into far right wing ideology. And it's sort
Yes.
of a reimagination of um, the concept of the Jewish international conspiracy mixed
Right.
up with a plot for a godless, stateless communist society. So it's like the idea of Hitler mixed with the idea of the Soviet Union, um, uh, fear of this world conspiracy trying to unite everybody and oppress them. And you think about the far right wing being like, no, we're individualistic and we want to take care of ourselves, and we don't want government. This is sort of like the antithesis. So they became very fearful of this neoliberal idea of uniting the world through trade deals and uh, things like that. Ironically, the other side of the ideological coin that emerged after the Soviet Union collapsed, neoconservatism, was about exporting sort of Americanism across the globe through, war and through nation building and things like that. And that ideology actually exploits a lot of right-leaning and far right-wing people because they oftentimes are in places where there's not much economic opportunity, and then they join the military and then they get sent to some country, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Just speaking on that, two quick things. What I think is interesting with the New World Order,
Mm-hmm.
too, it sounds very inclusive, right?
Yeah.
Just the words, but the level of xenophobia is off the charts. Like, you're not like me, I'm scared of you, I don't like you. That's that, which is just it's not
In
human.
combating the New World Order is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's the ideology of the New World Order, is you're not like me, therefore I don't like you and I'm scared of you, when in reality the words would make you think, oh, it's for everyone.
Yes.
And as far as the military, it definitely is a way out for a lot of people, but in no way, because so many of my friends serve and whatnot, is it anyway diminishing, I guess, is the best way I would put it, because I know that it, everybody serves for a different reason, not just a way out and stuff. So
I mean, that's definitely not what I meant, and maybe I should have been more careful with how I said it. What I really mean is like that people. So there's this saying of men. It's something like old men behind desks send young men to their deaths, something like that. So I feel like a lot of people use ideology like neoconservatism to exploit what we were talking about last time, like this excess testosterone and this sort of like sense of adventure and wanting to apply yourself to something bigger than yourself in a lot of young men, to send them to, like, this isn't a defensive war. This isn't a war of protecting the American homeland from external attack. These are like sending people out to, so I put more of the blame on the people who are kind of acting as exploiters here.
And the propaganda that goes into recruiting and everything,
exactly.
There's a lot of different reasons that people go in. I know people that have gone in because they've always wanted to. It's a family tradition. This will pay for school, this and this. And, I mean, if that makes you happy, by all means,
Yeah, I think it's more contingent upon us, either the non-servers and basically everybody else, to elect people who responsibly use those people who dedicate their lives to serving in the military or something like that,
and not treat them like second-class citizens when they come back.
Yeah, and not revoke the promise of like, oh yeah, well, your veterans benefits for life.
Yeah, veterans' rights are something that I think about a lot, and that's a whole other thing. But anyway, back on the other stuff. As far as like the emergence of neoliberalism and neoconservatism, I think, and to this day, I find it interesting that people need to find such an extreme of anything to be a part of. Like, it's like you're either all in or not.
Yeah.
And in some senses, in some senses it makes sense. Like, if you're pregnant, you're either all in or you're not. It's one or the other. But if you're on a spectrum like politics, there's some wiggle room.
Yeah.
Same with religion, same with, I don't know, most things. Like, unless there's a definitive start and end, and I don't know why I picked pregnancy, but if there's a definitive
that's pretty good. There's a binary, that's an actual legitimate binary.
Yeah. Like, I mean, most things are relative, and the amount of time and effort that you put into them. But then if you look at something that doesn't need this, hard right or hard left, and again, I just did the wrong hands. I need to work on that.
It worked in the way that you were on my monitor.
I know, but it bugged me. I'm a college graduate, you guys, so more than just a hat rack.
You seem super fancy in the way that you were like, whoa, this person is so advanced that they knew which hands to use in the mirror image on the video display.
It's many years of theater. Stage right, stage left. Still can't figure it out, but I pretend like I know. But I think when you're on a spectrum of that sort, finding a way to be an extremist of any kind is like, it's being that kid in class that waves their hand around like a lunatic, even though the teacher sees you. Now they're purposely not calling on you. Calm down. We all know that kid. The one that's like, if I dislocate my shoulder, you'll let me answer.
Absolutely.
It almost seems like that to me on both sides.
Yeah, I think it kind of gets down to the human tendency to to have to bin each other
Mm-hmm.
and assign strict labels. And I know we talked about this before, but we need to realize that has strategic advantage. But those are like permeable bins. They're not made of rigid material. So like people can move between bins or sit on the edge of bins. Like most people aren't squarely within any bin. So
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, wiggle room.
a
The
ton of
second you put yourself into a bin or you compartmentalize and say, "This is what I am. This is all I am," you're setting yourself up for a very short trajectory to nowhere.
Yeah, I think that.
And
Oh, sorry, I
I
didn't
mean,
cut you
again,
off.
unless
But
it's
you
something with a
stalled again.
definitive start and a no, I was just gonna say whether it's unless it's got a definitive start and a definitive end, leave yourself some room to go bin to bin, or you're missing out.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that people's brains are different in the sense of some people can feel like they have an individual identity, and other people, the feeling of freedom and sort of like assigning their own meaning to life is so phenomenally terrifying that they like simply have to find somebody to tell them, find an ideologue or messiah or somebody who is a cult leader, somebody to tell them and assign a label to themselves to seek comfort in that label.
Which is why sometimes people do join the military, to have that structure
Yeah.
and have that extra time to kind of go, okay, this is what I am right now,
Mhm.
and then this is how I'll transition out and become something else, which is
Yes.
fine.
And that's a
Um,
productive use of that feeling. Some people need regimentation at different points in their lives, which I get. But to have that, if you get too far into that view of life, then you start to see people who don't have that as like, the enemy to your system of thought.
yeah, and
Must be destroyed.
it's where you put that too, because like if you're in the military,
Mhm.
you are given obviously what you're intended to do, and they don't hand you a viewpoint, but they hand you kind of like, for instance, Marine Corps boot camp is a huge indoctrination period
Mhm.
into the Marines, because there's the saying, once Marine, always a Marine. You're never not a Marine,
Mhm.
because you're inducted into a culture and a lifestyle, and you have to get in and everything. And that's very cool. I wanted to be a Marine for
Mhm.
a long time. Um, but with that, you're then given the wide berth of the world to make your own decisions. You
Mhm.
just kind of have a playbook to go by, as opposed to you join a really big church. And again, there's nothing against going to church, but you join a church that actively hates on other people. Like,
Mhm.
we'll bring up the Westboro Baptist Church because they're a fantastic example. You have an active hate group, and that's how you define yourself. You're putting yourself into a bin that you really, really can't get out of unless you're very lucky you escape. I
Mhm.
feel like anything you have to escape except for a preconceived escape room, you're doing it wrong.
Mhm.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, and it's not these things obviously aren't something that are undergone rationally. Like it's generally an act of desperation. And so
Yeah.
there's not really long-term planning. So people don't really think through the fact that when you join something like a hate group, it's effectively like having it's unfortunate that our society works this way, but it's like having a criminal record. I mean, think about how difficult it is for uh, felons or ex-cons, whatever the terminology is, how difficult it is for them to get a job and to continue life, return to some sense of normalcy after they're out into the real world. Like when people leave a hate group, I'm hoping that we can improve this sort of across the board with people. Like, we need to improve our forgiveness and our
Yeah.
compassion for people, because if people feel like they have a path out, then they won't be forced further and further into some, you know,
Like
terrible.
Christian Picciolini, who
Yeah.
I know both of us would love to talk to.
Mhm.
um, yeah, no, I mean you hit the nail right on the head. I couldn't put it better myself.
When it comes to veterans, we just talked about before. I think, by the way, I think that's cool. You wanted to be a Marine for a bit.
One time.
uh, it's unfortunate that military service dissolves your individualized self so that you can perform more cohesively as a unit and die for each other and things like that, right? And that's partly why you're always stationed with a buddy.
Yeah, you got
um,
your battle buddy.
yeah, your
And
battle buddy, and like they don't really want you thinking for yourself and questioning things. So like in the context of warfare, that that makes well, yeah, I mean, when I say that, I mean generally, like they want you to follow orders, right?
yeah,
That's sort of the best.
kind of their style of leadership.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that regimented follow orders, top down authoritarian style of living, that is never undone at the end of military service. They never transition people back into living as an individualized self in
Right.
society. So what you end up with is a lot of people who are like free floating and who become depressed and abuse substances, and you get a high rate of veteran suicide.
Yeah, there's 22 a day. There's the 22 a day project because every day in America we lose 22 veterans
That's
on average to suicide.
that's
Um,
seriously bleak.
it is because if you think about the people that are going, okay, I'll serve my country for whatever the reason is, and then we can't take care of them. That's some
Yeah.
bullshit right there.
And Vietnam vet homelessness is insanely high.
Yeah, and like Vietnam vets too, like they're not that young. Um, but I knew someone who now is married and everything, but he came back from I think his second tour in Afghanistan and actively chose to be homeless. I remember trying to figure that out with him and he said, "Nope, I want to live on the street. That's what I want to do." And he did for I didn't hear from him for months, so I don't know how long he was on the street or whatever, but it was a choice he made, and he's married now and off doing his own thing, and I wish him all the best. But it was tough. I was younger too, and it was tough for me to wrap my head around. But and to many degrees, it still is. But it's something that every person's different.
It is. It's tough also to balance exactly how you support veterans and support people's valor, and you acknowledge people who have died, people who have been wounded, um, but you at the same time criticize the people at the top who, you know, who make terrible decisions often. And I understand that there's a lot of stress also. Like, I'm not trying to be an armchair uh, you know um, assessor of war and the military, but we get
Yeah,
a lot of wars that are like are just bullshit wars too. You know what I mean? Like the
yeah,
second half of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st century has been like really abusing people's commitment to the country in my eyes.
no, I agree. There's a lot of people that sign on the dotted line and are very happy to do so and proud to do so, and then it effectively gets screwed over by the people that are above them because when you take the oath, you will promise to obey the commands of the officers above you,
Mm.
and the top one is the president, and him and his bone spurs, but uh
Hope that the person at the top has good judgment, and not
yeah,
only
like
but good intelligence.
that's the hope.
Not always the case, huh?
No.
which it's a pretty good transition to, this is something that I'm reading right now. I find it really fascinating, and it ties together, and I should say it's the book is called The Cult of Trump. And it's really ties together everything within the Trump presidency in a not overly emotional, like you see in the nightly news way.
Yeah.
And it's written by Stephen Hassan, who's sort of the foremost expert in cults. So the term cult there isn't used loosely.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't really gotten to absorb a lot of his work, but I know of him and he's preeminent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wrote another. It's buried under my pile of books over there, but he wrote sort of the definitive cult recognition book, and it's the BITE model is what he uses. I don't know what those BITE stands for, but it's like the different ways that they control you, the four domains. But so I'll give a little story here. Back, let's say 3 years ago, I was noticing how people who put themselves under the label of social justice, kind of like the social justice warrior, if you will, behaved in a very like regimented and cult-like way. And I found that, that was really off-putting. And although they had some, like, a lot of valid messages and things that they were trying to get across, they were really pushing people away. And I was one of those people, and I started to really kind of look into, I started to watch things kind of all across YouTube, sort of in the other direction, because I felt like they were really trying to tilt the conversation hardcore in like a further left direction.
Yeah.
So I started overcompensating in the more conservative direction. And the further in that direction, I started to listen to people like, Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, and kind of names that a lot of social justice warrior rage get directed at. And I was like, oh, these people are like, they're criticizing these people, and they're right. These people do act like lunatics a lot of the time. And after a while, I felt like I had kind of like overindulged myself in listening to these other side viewpoints, and then I was like, okay, do they actually talk about anything else aside from, like, Antifa,
Yeah.
this left-leaning group and things like that? And I was like, do I actually even really agree with what a lot of these people are saying? Or did I just say to myself originally that the people on the other side are so, like, ridiculous in how they behave that I want to distance myself from that? And that's kind of what I realized is, like, in trying to distance myself from one set of behavior, I kind of moved towards into further into the other direction. And I think that's where a lot of people are. And I think that is sort of the perfect domain for what Trump can take into his base, is people who sort of like think that they're more conservative or right wing than they actually are,
Yeah.
and who haven't exactly realized that, oh, there's a lot of crazy shit going on that side too, and that you should
Yeah.
sort of stay near the middle,
Yeah, and I give you a lot of credit for giving both sides a chance and taking a really objective look, because it's very easy to fall into what you know and go that way. But like you said, staying in the middle, it's hard, but it's very important, especially times like now,
Mm-hmm.
where you have people that are ready to, or are already like storming the streets about civil liberties and stuff with quarantine. There's actually someone who had a poster that had the same inscription as the gates of Auschwitz. Work will set you free. And I always butcher it when I try to say it in German, so I just won't. But if you Google the gates of Auschwitz, there's...
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah. I can't pronounce it. You would think with my course of study That would be something I can pronounce, but we'll get there. But to see that on a poster board regarding staying in your house because there's a lot of sick people, or wearing a mask because there's a lot of sick people in a highly contagious environment, you gotta kind of wonder where the morality lies. Because it makes no sense to me that you can take something that is tied, goodbye phone, that is tied in with such hatred and anti-Semitism and apply it to a health precaution. So I saw that, and that kind of made me think to myself, okay, there's someone who's way off on the far right. And then there's, people like us that are, it's getting tiring. It's getting boring being at home. I am, a very good yard worker now because I have nothing else to do. But, I've said this before, with everything going on. I think of my grandparents a lot, that if they didn't know what was going on minute to minute, I can ride out a few months in my house because they made it. But to see something like that up against an illness that we're just trying to contain and do our part with, it makes you wonder what drives that person to that level of extremism. And if they're willing to go that extreme on one side, why can't they take a look at the left? Let's say, and you don't have to go to the extreme side either. I know people that are in, that are the most social justice warrior people ever.
Yeah.
Like, they are warriors for the justice that is social. But I couldn't see myself being a part of that either, because it's just too much. Now, you know me, you know that there are many things that I'm very, very passionate about and sit pretty firmly on.
Yeah.
But I've done a lot of research to get to the point where I can go, this is how I feel about this. And here is a litany of supportive reasons as to why I feel this way.
Yes.
Then there's people that maybe it's brainwashing, maybe it's fuck you government, maybe it's fuck you past government, maybe it's, I don't know. I don't know what causes people to think in some of the manners that they do. But you have to wonder, what's misfiring that makes it seem like this is okay? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do definitely know what you mean. I think that there's one thing is a sense of going to any depth to be seen as clever in the joke that you tell. Like, one of the things that I think drives, unfortunately, a lot of the sort of like pseudo or highly questionable content coming out of the right is how much it inflames and pisses off people who are clearly like easy to antagonize, and that was, I have to admit, it was entertaining at first to see that, because I'm like, yeah, these people are like, a lot of these people are like overly sensitive and coddled, and then I started to see like, whoa, people are really going down like dark roads with some of this content. And that joke of like, work will set you free, like, I have to say that that's actually very clever, but that's not something that you should put on a, like, clever in the sense of like, oh, there's this old reference from this gate on Auschwitz, and it actually like makes sense in this context here when you're saying, hey, people, leave your quarantine, work, go back to work. But like, not something you should put on a poster, because of the way that this tie, like, it's people not really having the empathy, or ranking the empathy less than the than the recognition or the validation that they get of someone else being like, oh, like, good joke, I like that.
Or, you know,
So,
remote common sense, not to broadcast it to the world.
yeah, you know, like, if you have to say that, then say it to like a group of close friends who'll be like, oh man, that's dark, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, don't put it on a
Funny.
poster. Yeah,
Yeah.
so, you know, it seems like you're getting a lot of people who, you know, the term infotainment,
I
how,
do.
you know, like, what are their names? Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart were like, they were giving the news, but they
My
were also
boys.
being
My
comedians,
boys.
right? And they would often, if you kind of are like, oh, well, I don't know about that. What do you mean by that? They'd be like, oh, I'm a comedian. I'm a comedian. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are doing that right now, where they're sort of
Right.
being like ironic Nazis. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen this happen with so many different things. Is people like, I've seen a ton of guys be ironic douchebags, where they're like, I'm gonna be a douchebag to people, but then I'm gonna be like, oh no, but I'm impersonating a douchebag. You get the joke? And it's like, yeah, but you just were a douchebag. Like, what the?
Yeah, like I know I know too many guys that are like, nah, I'm just kidding. And it's like, nah, you're just a douche,
Yeah,
man.
it's just
But
something that a lot
it's
of people with this Nazi stuff. I think I'm not
yeah,
trying to diminish it like that, but a lot of people are kind of in that category where they're like, they don't realize the effect of what they're doing and the fuel that it's adding to this
they
fire.
they have no idea or they don't care
Yeah,
is a big thing too. It's all very not he said she said, but it's very very subjective.
hmm
It the world's a confusing place.
it is.
That I'm gonna call that like that's the title of my memoir right there. The world's a confusing place.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. It's
No, I
it's
mean,
very it's just very complex, and like, we tend to, the human mind wants to flatten and create narratives. It wants to reduce complexity, whether it's in people, in situations, and the world is extremely complex. I think we're realizing that a lot of us are waking up to the complexity, the nuance.
as we're trying to flatten the curve, we got to flatten the crazy too. But you know, it's interesting with the amount of research that I've been doing, which I was now told, which is very cool. I've been working on this for over 2 years now, so apparently I am now well within my right to say yes, my research, not just a project I'm working on. Um, in that, I've noticed that through a lot of this, it feels like 2020 has been like a couple years already,
Yeah,
but through that there has been such a shift in social dynamics, whether it's towards the positive because people want to take care of each other, or towards the negative where you have some idiot in the street going, I don't want to wear a mask, you can't tell me what to do, here's a really offensive poster.
yeah,
And it's interesting, the dichotomy, because you don't find a lot of people in the middle, or maybe you don't find them because they're not out there trying to be provocative.
I think that's a lot of it. um, it's people who are just kind of like, I'm just going to focus on either my work or my family, or this, like, I don't want to think about this crazy stuff, or like, either I don't have the time or I don't have the energy, or I just find this stuff so disturbing or difficult to understand that I don't even want to get into it. So
Yeah,
I think you get a mix of that in the middle.
I think so. And it's also, you know, the people that are just like, hey, I just want to, you know, stay healthy, keep my family healthy,
Yeah,
do my part by staying inside. Yes, it's boring, but you'll get there. You know, it's it's all like I say, it's all relative. It's just really how you choose to deal with it. You know.
yeah. I think that really what people need to do is, kind of start to look at both sides, as having cult-like aspects to them at their worst. And
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, just, I have another book here. I read this a while back, and this is a funny one. but it's this is sort of mocking the
Oh my
social
god.
justice side.
I am so woke.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like there is an absolute cult-like mentality to that too. And there's tons of YouTube videos of people talking like, yeah, I left the SJW left. And they talk about how there was, you know, they would defer to authority figures, how their identity was wrapped around these beliefs, how they didn't want to draw attention to themselves and say, you know, I actually have a problem with this.
Yeah.
And they would talk about how the feeling of moral superiority was like a intoxicating to them, you know?
Yeah.
And I had meant to bring this up before. One of the reasons why I was originally fairly disgusted with this sort of like woke SJW ideology was I really didn't like how each of these groups, kind of like traditionally you have LGBT, women, Black, Latino, like how all these groups were treating members of their own group. Like if you didn't toe the party line of being a woman, like this is what a woman is supposed to think. This is what a gay person is supposed to think. Like if you didn't fit into this monolithic idea of what an ideal gay person was or an ideal trans person or Black person or woman, whatever, then you were like you had your black
Yeah.
card revoked or your women card revoked. It's like that's some fucked up shit. Like I wasn't that.
Yeah.
That's what sort of pushed me away to begin with.
There was something I read recently on Facebook, and it was about the term Karen, calling someone a Karen.
Yeah.
And like it's funny because like in my old neighborhood, like my second mom, like she's like a second mom to me, her name was Karen. And I was like, that's unfortunate right now. But people are taking such offense to it. And then there was someone that was like, well, to you guys, every Black person's like LaQuisha or something, and you know, Jews are this and Spanish people are that, and it was all this stuff, and it was like, and you guys can't take what 11 months of a joke. So you kind of step back for a second, and it's like, are you as woke as you think you are? And
most people are not.
What happened to grammar? Good days of grammar are went, as they say.
What was that?
The good days of grammar are went.
Yeah.
I wish that was mine. It's not, but it's a good one.
I mean, there really are two extremes that are maybe not equally as bad, but are both like actually pretty messed up. So like we know, like we get the argument that bigotry, which is more generally on the right, is bad. But
Yes.
then if you get too far on the other side, you get deference, which is like also pretty fucked up, which is just being like, we're going to treat these historically disenfranchised groups like this halo effect we put on them, and like anything that they say or do is okay, and like there are pets and we're going to protect them and they don't have any agency of their own, and we're just going to defer to everything that they say. It's like, no, that's also fucked up. Just like treat people like people. Don't be overly deferential to them, and don't be bigot assholes to them. You know, like both of those
just be
things
like,
are not
hey,
good.
we're human.
Yeah.
Like, do you think dogs look at each other and be like, that one's a schnauzer. Fuck that guy. Like, God, I hope. No, dogs are too happy.
Yeah, dogs are.
Dogs are, like,
generally very happy.
They are. Like, if you think about something as universal as a dog and a dog's happiness, like, one iota of that in our society, and we'd be a bunch of different people.
Yeah, maybe we can start swapping human and dog brains.
That would be very expensive and incredibly messy and probably lethal and definitely against the law. But you know what? We'll put a pin in that.
And if everything worked properly, it would still be probably extremely messed up. So.
Yeah, well, you know, there'd be the alpha dogs and stuff. It would be this whole thing.
So one of the things that, like I was alluding to before, like we need to, I think, see cult-like aspects on both sides, the SJW side and definitely on the Trump side too. And that's what I really like about the Trump book, is that like there are aspects of right-wing politics that are sort of talked about in overly, in like a very hyperbolic way on the news, in which a lot of people I think dismiss, but are really important, particularly right-wing Christianity, and that's not to say Christianity in its entirety, but like as a political philosophy, Christianity, as
Well, I was
well
gonna.
as the media, you know, like Fox News, right-wing radio, all of these things, like they're extremely influential, extremely like they keep a tight fence around right-wing ideology
Yeah.
and what it is
Yeah.
to be a good conservative, a good patriot, a good Christian, whatever, right?
Right. And I think that I was going to say, it doesn't apply to all Christianity or any religion, because they're like, oh, they're radical Muslims, they're radical Islam, they're radical this, radical that. Have not heard that about Judaism. Doesn't matter. Anyway,
That's a conversation I want to have with you maybe on another day, is sort of like within Judaism, the schisms or whatever you want to call them, you know, like the different, I don't know.
sure. Yeah, I mean, as I've said before, I fall very on the ish side of Jew,
Yeah.
but you know, but obviously my heritage is very important to me, and actually, a moment of self-promotion, I am beginning to write a book, um, uh, per some suggestion by one of my mentors, Dr. Offenberger, and if it all goes well, by the end of next year, should be pretty solid on the way to being able to go to print.
Right on.
Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm going to be writing not necessarily a memoir, but what it's like to grow up with grandparents that survived the Holocaust, and basically why I feel it's so important for our generation to rise to the occasion, and the platform we have to use it for good.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about that some other time.
Okay.
But it does tie in that once you throw the words right wing or left wing in front of anything, it becomes radicalized.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to something like right wing Christianity, that can take so many forms that become so negative. And I know some people that are heavily devout Christians, have a Bible on them all the time, and are some of the nicest people I know.
Yeah.
I know some other people, or know of some other people that are heavily devout Christians, have a Bible on them all the time, and are so unbelievably judgmental. It's disgusting. So it runs the gambit, and I think it does kind of come into play with, deciding where you fall on the spectrum, and how you perceive people and the conversations you're willing to have with people. Like one guy that I work with is, you wouldn't know because he doesn't shove it down your throat, but he's a very religious man. In a lit class that I was taking this past semester, we had to read the Bible for context, stories from the Bible for context. And I remember just being like, number one, the amount of names, it was very confusing to follow because they all start with vowels. They all did very similar things. But anyway, I remember having very long conversations with him, even though he's, a devout Christian and I'm a Hanukkah celebrating Jew. And that's about it. But but the ability to have just the debate discussion, or not even a debate, just the ability to talk freely about ideas, that should be something that's fostered. And I think that, especially now when you're trying to establish your place in the world, especially people our age, have conversations, get to understand other people's points of view. There, by no means do you have to agree with them, but you don't have to completely vilify them unless it's like really messed up, like they're axe murderers, and let you know that, because then there's numbers you can call and I'll let you know. But like otherwise, just, it sounds so trite and stuff, but just give people a chance. You don't need to go to one extreme or another. you can just, I mean, if you need to, go to that extreme, see what it's about, and then come back.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and stay.
Exactly. Give people enough, I love this expression, give people enough rope to hang themselves. I know that sounds gruesome, but like if you get into a conversation with somebody and you just open with them and you allow them to speak, then people start to get lost and realize the logical inconsistencies of their own belief system.
Yeah.
That's sort of the Daryl Davis method. And
It is.
it
And
worked pretty well for him.
yeah, he seems to have, something going on up there.
Yeah.
But, as far as like everybody's ideology differs a little bit,
Mhm.
even if you're like, yes, we believe the same thing, and for the most part we do, or whatever. When you give each other a chance to talk, just like you shut yourself up and listen and have an actual conversation, the things that make you so different really aren't that divisive.
Yeah.
Again, unless you're like an axe murderer, because then we're very different people, and have a nice day. But between having a conversation with anyone is interesting enough. Like, I favorite places in the world to talk to people, maybe not right now, but in general. But
Again right there?
The airport.
Oh, the airport. Yeah.
Because I find if I get lost in my phone or a book, I can miss stuff that's going on, which is not good. But I remember I was taking a flight, and I think I was going to Chicago. Don't quote me on that, but I was going somewhere because there was a plane involved. And there was a guy on my flight that had a turban, was dressed in like traditional garb, and no one was sitting near him. And I was like, that's odd. Like, aren't we evolved enough? And I'm not in any way going like I am the patron saint of good people.
Yeah.
But I went and sat down next to him because I was like, if this guy wants to strike up a conversation, I am down. I have some questions.
Yeah.
None of them are really religion based. More just like I don't want to call it a robe because I'm sure it's called something else.
Yeah.
But what he was wearing was very intricate, and I was interested in it. And like, it was that little thing that was very cool, just getting to talk to somebody that was clearly very different than me. But
it meant a lot, unless the guy was just like, ugh, so annoyed.
No, I sat down and like,
so next time you just like, get the hell away from me.
I sat down and like, I still had a book on my lap and stuff, like, and because I'm the type of person, like, you sit down next to me, I'll say hi.
Yeah.
And he engaged me in a conversation. He asked what I was reading, and we got to talking, and he ended up being like this fascinating guy who's got like literally 100 like grandkids and great grandkids, and I was like, that's awesome. And he even laughed, and he was like, I'm playing into a stereotype, but whatever. And he was just like a really cool guy. And again, it's not like I'm bridging the gaps of humanity, but it was just one of those things that it was an opportunity that I'm really glad I took, because he was very interesting. And we also bonded over the fact that whoever decided that they thought that they needed to bring Red Lobster on that flight is my new least favorite person.
That sounds repulsive.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. You got it past the gates, but like, eat it and then get on the flight, please.
There's a very narrow range of things that you're supposed to be eating on a plane. It's basically stuff that's dried out. Like, you could, even then, it can't even be crunchy. Like, you don't want to scent, you don't want to crunch. I don't even know what it is, like a cup of pudding or something.
I don't know. I mean, when I travel, when I get to the airport, I have my routine. I go through security, never fails. I get a pat down. I don't know why, but I do. I go through security, get my shoes back on, get my stuff. I go get pretzels and a giant thing of water, because pretzels are a safe food, they're pretty universal. And wherever I'm going, water has a taste. I'm putting it out there. Water has a taste.
Bar water has a taste.
All water has a taste. But, so I grab like a bottle of Poland Spring or something, because then I'll also have it. and like maybe I'll get a coffee or something, but I do not bring aromatic stuff on a plane. I try very hard not to. Anyway, like I was finishing a coffee once on my way onto the plane, and one of the stewardesses took it for me and like put it in the garbage like when they came around, and just essentially a tangent of plane etiquette. Don't be the idiot, just dick that is like, hey, this is like a 7-course meal that I'm going to eat very loudly.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy, everyone.
It's a lesson that is going to be hard fought.
I know.
if you convert anybody in that. So I commend you for sitting down next to the guy. That's very cool. And
just another
by the
person.
way, this is what ultimately needs to happen, I think, is each of the religions. I mean, we'll talk about the 3 main ones: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or the 3 main monotheistic ones. They each need to sort of press for their more reformed version. You know what I mean? Like, we need to have less emphasis on the sacredness of the text, realizing that the text has valuable lessons and morals, but that you don't have to accept the full, total truth of the text. And actually, one of the things that originally got me into this was like the video that set off this whole chain reaction of my search down right-wing or more right-leaning material is a video on Bill Maher about 5 years ago. Do you know who Sam Harris is?
I do.
So we had Sam Harris on, and there were a couple other panelists, including Ben Affleck, and they were talking about Islam. And Sam Harris.
Seen this video.
You've seen it?
I have.
Okay,
I have, because it shaped my opinion on Bill Maher.
It in a good way or a bad way or a.
There have been other videos that have shaped my opinions on Bill Maher, but that one was not particularly in his best interest.
Yeah.
Because I mean, aside from coming off like a dick a lot, he is pretty noted as an Islamophobe.
Yeah, I do know that he's like hardcore, and this is actually he's hardcore against pretty much all religion. Like, he's got his documentary Religious.
I saw that.
This is where I think he can be a bit of an elitist asshole, is when he talks about like almost like all religious people are just idiots for believing any sense of religious narrative in their life.
And that drives me crazy, because he's got such a big platform, and like, if that's your opinion, I guess I get it, but it sends such a negative message, because then, if you circle back to the Holocaust, you get rounded up because you believe in something different.
Yes. This is where, so when I saw that video at the time, in the context that I was viewing it, this was the first time that I had heard in like a more academic way a criticism of Islam that wasn't like, what I saw was Ben Affleck acting like a child. He was literally throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
And what Sam Harris was saying was like well thought out. And he was saying, so within Islam, of course, you have like a billion people within Islam. You have tons of people who are, don't have any ill will towards anybody. But it's not just the jihadists that are the problem. Then you have the Islamists outside of that circle. And then you have the Muslim conservatives who, they don't hurt anybody, or they don't throw anybody off rooftops, but they condone or approve of like beheadings of people who leave the faith or stuff like that. And I was like, he was basically saying that that's a much larger group than just like this couple of bad apples. He was saying that there's like, maybe 25%, 30% of Islam are people who believe some like, and I see that comparable with Christianity and probably Judaism too, where like you have like very problematic views of like human rights and.
In Christianity, one thing that's just popping into my head is like Mormonism, right? People, I mean, I've watched a few documentaries and read a couple books, but I don't profess to understand the whole system thing. The concept of being a Mormon missionary I found very interesting, because there's a huge process that goes along into it, and there's this whole thing. But that aside, everyone once it was Warren Jeffs, his FLDS compound, the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints,
Yep.
let them out. Everyone got this opinion that all Mormons are, awful and psycho. And I've worked in a kitchen with a Mormon, and she was a sweet woman, like, didn't really, I asked her a lot of questions, which is probably why there was more religious talk at work than anything else, but that was because I had a million questions.
Yeah.
Because, documentaries don't answer everything.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as it goes, like, it is those bad apples that give such a negative view and a negative perception on certain religions, but at the same time, it's, I don't know, man, just find common ground and stick to it, honestly.
Not only that, which is a good point, but also have a high percentage of literate people
Yes.
in your religion, in your country, whatever. Encourage that, which is like, unfortunately, you would think that would be in the interest of the religion itself, but that would be completely out of the interest of the institutions of the religion, because they want all the power. And if people know how to read or interpret the text, then they're going to be like, I see all these inconsistencies, or what the fuck is this? This doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So it's not just literacy. I think that literacy is an issue, and that far fewer people are literate than should be. But it's also reading comprehension, because it's not just reading. This is what people think. It's like, oh, I can blast through a bunch of books. You go, okay, what did you just read? Did you get any of it? What did you take away from it?
Not a clue.
I don't know. I was just trying to plow through it so I could say that I read 10 books. Well, okay, that doesn't mean anything then.
Yeah. It's like, some books you can blast through because they're very simple to comprehend, and those are usually, like, the easy reads and stuff like that. But if you're going to read something for its substance, take the time to, like, really delve into it and to think about what you're learning about, because it's like, what do you want to lose, really, from reading a book?
This is honestly probably what got me back into reading. I started sort of at the tail end of college, but like there just seemed to be so many arguing, bitching people, and like highly opinionated people that were arguing on behalf of some text. And I was like, most people for sure have not even read the text that they're arguing about. Like, the amount of Christians that have actually read the Bible, the amount of people who argue, right-wing people who argue on behalf of Americanism, who have read the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, like the amount of communists who have read Das Kapital, the amount of Nazis that have read Mein Kampf. Any organization, the people who are like diehard fanatical have no fucking clue about their sacred doctrine. And if you like actually read the sacred doctrine, you're like, oftentimes you go, well, this is it. Like, obviously, that's not to say that all doctrine, all texts are created equal. Like, some have better values built in that are more conducive to human flourishing. Like, I can acknowledge that. But at the same time, like, I really think that we should be aware of what the texts that we argue on behalf of actually say. And we should be willing to modernize our texts over time.
I agree. I'm not a big reality TV show fan, but there was a reality show that I loved about 13 years ago called Kid Nation. And I would devote way too long to talking about it because I find it fascinating. But another story for another day. Because it is a very interesting thing to delve into and think about, but we'll talk about it. Anyway, on one of the episodes, the kids were kind of faced with, there was an age group of 8 to 15-year-olds, and they were faced with a decision about having religious books and, bringing religion to their society. And there's a moment where 2 10-year-olds are sitting there reading. One's a Methodist and one is Jewish, and they're reading basically the same things. They're both reading Genesis, the first book of the Torah and the first book of the Bible. Mm. And it's like, you can see kids having these arguments that sound like they're clearly parroting what they've heard before, because this isn't their own thought process. At the same time, you then wonder, okay, well, they got this ideological way of thinking from where they came from. So then you want to look at the parents and be like, okay, why? Or is it fear of the unknown? Is it fear of differentiation? And then when you look at it, like first book of the Torah and first book of the Bible, same thing, same words. And it's just like, if you can see kids like trying to make sense out of it, it's like, come on, adults, pull your shit together.
Yeah,
they can put it together. Why can't we?
I don't think that a lot of these things can be addressed directly. Like, I think when people try to convince other people, like, hey, I think you're brainwashed, like, largely. I think you grew up under this.
Take well to that. If you're like, hey, I think you're brainwashed, they're like, excuse me.
Yeah, like, I think you grew up under this system of thought. Like, this is one thing that you got to realize is, like, you have to be patient with people and sort of, like, lead them to a conclusion. It's almost like the movie Inception, where you're like, you have to implant the idea in their brain stealthily. I'm not saying to do this in a nefarious way, like Bernays often did use propaganda, but I'm saying, like, in an ethical way, plant the idea of, like, hey, you grew up in a closed ideological system, and a lot of people, even though they're brainwashed, they don't want to, like, basically believe it, right? So, right. Like, you can't just run at the front gates with your battering ram and expect, you know, the person to be like, oh, you're right, I'm brainwashed, I was in a cult, or like, no, you've got to be, like, creative, and you've got to, like, work with the person and actually show the person that you care about them, and you're not just trying to manipulate them in some other direction. It's the same thing with what I noticed on the left, with, like, people who thought that they were morally superior, and then who would try to, like, convince other people about trying to adopt that morally superior position by, like, smashing them in the face with it. And if the person didn't respond like, oh yeah, you're right, I'm an idiot, or I'm a bad person, then it was like, you know, that person was
relegated to the back.
It's like, no, like, you have some good ideas, but your technique of trying to pitch them to other people is awful. Like,
yeah, it's like good thought, awful follow through.
Yeah.
You know,
stupid and evil is not a good sales tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I became friends recently with 2 great people. They're a great couple, and they're super funny. And they're probably listening to this, so hey guys. But they both came from very super religious backgrounds, and I've been like, I have so many questions, and it's a conversation we're gonna have at some point. We just haven't had the time to, like, sit down and talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those, like, over text conversations. It's like, I want just, like, let's speak to me, you know, because I'm genuinely interested in that they came out of those, like, religious groups or cults or whatever you want to call it. That's on them to define. That being said, people do come out of it, and then I think maybe have a more radicalized view of anti whatever they've come from. So it really does vary person to person, but not every person has come out of a cult-like situation. Not every person has been in a cult-like situation. Mm-hmm. So it's, again, it's morality, it's humanity, it's all these things that we're really lacking right now when we need it the most. Yeah. I can't stress that enough. Like, I know social distance, but, like, freaking give each other a hug and calm down. Yeah. And you essentially need I'm not sure how much of this is learned versus innate. We'll have those arguments with every human capacity forever, probably. But patience, like, you have to have endless patience with people. And you also have to have a good sense of whether the things that you're talking about with other people are actually landing. Like, if they're resonating with that person. I'm not saying it happens immediately, but, like, you know, after, like, you know,
a month of conversation with somebody, if they haven't budged at all, then like some people really are, you're not going to make progress with them. And like one example, as we've talked about, is narcissists. Like if you have narcissistic personality disorder, you can spend endless time with that person.
And you can try and try and try.
Yeah, psychotherapy does help to an extent, I've heard, but like the average person talking to that person, you're not going to budge that person. Like the way they see the world, the way that their brain operates is like very self-centered and
self-serving.
Self-serving.
But at the same time, and I think we talked about this once, was that self-serving also comes with such self-hatred that I've seen. Yeah. Again.
No, that you're right. That's like the central, that's like the sun at the center of the narcissist solar system, which is...
the narcissist solar system is the narcissist and everyone else.
Well, maybe I should say it's the black hole, which is not self-doubt, but like bad self-perception, or I can't think of the exact term that I'm looking for, basically, but it's like
self-deprecation.
No, it's like questioning self-worth. Low self-worth is at the center of it all. And they talk about this or I should say he talks about this, Stephen Hassan, in the Cult of Trump book, where there's a whole section on narcissistic personality disorder and the different types of narcissism and how it manifests in the president. And it's really fascinating because he talks about how Trump's, and he says that this isn't absolutely the case, but generally with narcissists, the mother was distant, the father was authoritarian, and mothers, particularly in the first 2 years, they impart compassion and empathy to the child. So like a close maternal bond really shapes the child's sociability later in life. And if that bond is torn apart, then that can really have terrible effects on that person's adult behavior in their adult relationships. So there's sort of like an overcompensation. And in this case, it's difficult to communicate to people how truly important it is to recognize narcissistic personality disorder, not in a way that you're like diagnosing people and be like, oh, that person has it, that person has it, that person has it. But like in this case, when it's somebody who's the leader of the country, that's not something you should just dismiss. Like if you haven't grown up with somebody who's a narcissist, or if you haven't been in a relationship with somebody or seen it, it's really hard to believe exactly what it is. And to just be like, oh, that's just somebody who likes themselves. No. Like there's some deep shit here. And like, for example, if they were given a situation where they had to choose between like their reputation in the country that they're meant to serve, like public service,
their reputation,
they will choose their reputation. They will throw their own family under the bus. They do not really have remorse or compassion or empathy. Like the borderline sociopathic, that kind of stuff,
Yeah, I mean, having dated someone, that guy, just that guy, on and off for 3 years, getting out of that was so hard because there was something that draws you back in, and it's usually compliments that you hear them giving themselves that you're finally getting, and you're going, okay, well, now the bad part's over. So I kind of wonder, this just popped into my head, but like supporters of Trump, I wonder if there are times where like he doles out that little bit of affection and you jump for it if you're a Trump supporter, and that's what keeps you on the crazy train, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of like he's kind of like daddy to a lot of people, and he says the things that everybody is thinking, or not everybody, but that a lot of people are thinking and they want to say but they can't. And then he's also just this guy who is saying, I'm going to take the system down. And a lot of people really are like, the negative effects of globalism in the neoliberal model have not really been addressed in a forthright way, where it's like, oh, not everybody is going to benefit from this in the same way. poorer communities are going to have their manufacturing shipped overseas. Shit like that's going to happen. And
Yeah.
Trump was the first one one of the first people to talk about this. And it really concerns me because I understand on the one hand why people or why some people gravitate towards him. A bunch of different, it's a coalition, it's not just like, not everybody likes him or supports him for the same reason. But
Yeah.
the amount of energy by this guy, first of all, he's going to choose, and he has chosen his cabinet based on the people who are most sycophantic and who flatter him the most. That is not in this country's best interest. So even if he talks a good game with like, I'm going to do this with China, I'm going to build this wall, I'm going to do this, like, his cabinet is not chosen in the best interest of achieving those goals. It's to ingratiate him. Not only that, but most of the energy that cabinet expends is going to be in trying to keep him feeling good about himself or impressed, or like, their energy is not going to be put into, it's going to be like an incredibly inefficient machine, where all of the waste heat is trying to coddle the president rather than get
That's
it done, solve problems.
that's so true. And God, I am scared for what the next person has to take over.
Yeah.
Whether it's after 4 years, or I don't want to think about 8, but just for the sake of the argument, are we gonna get like a magician, or is this when like Julie Andrews becomes the queen of America? Because she did a good job in the Princess Diaries. I'm just saying, reprise the role, fix it.
Yeah.
We're behind you. Throw Betty White up there. Maybe she might know what she's doing. I don't know.
This is honestly why ultimately, despite the fact that I think Biden is a terrible candidate, and it saddens me that the Democratic side has resorted to essentially selecting somebody with dementia. And also, I think that him being chosen, and feel free to disagree with me on any of this, I won't take it personally, but
I'm just laughing because
I
I
also
endorsed you, Joe. For what?
I also think that if he won the nomination, if he became president, that it would be seen as a sort of return to America as it was immediately pre-Trump. And like, no, that America was also falling apart and led to Trump. Like, we can't just return to that. We can't return to America as it was in this false notion of like, make America great again, 1950s land or whatever.
Yeah.
We also can't return to what it like the broken ass system that still is, and which was just before Trump as well. It wasn't idyllic.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot was fixed. I will say a lot was fixed, but nothing was perfect. Nothing has been perfect. There's nothing about our system, like, yes, democracy is great, but there's nothing about our system that you look at and you go, perfect.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be like an entire overhaul, but like major things, major institutions needed to be fixed. And I'm worried that if Joe Biden wins, then it's just going to be like, okay, like we'll just forget the last 4 years ever happened, return to this. Like, no, this shit needs serious attention. You can't just like focus on the establishment as it is.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I just don't think that I could bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. Like, seeing what a
I couldn't
narcissist
do it.
is, like, it's, and the guy is going to be 4 years older. Like, he's 74 right now. Man, like, I could not have a 77, 78-year-old narcissist in the White House. That is like
Oh,
a
that like
phenomenally bad idea.
just made my stomach hurt thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we've gotten this far without something like serious. I mean, there have been bad things that have happened, of course, but something like far worse than what's happened over the last 4 years, like
Yeah.
the start of a new major war or something like that.
Yeah. No,
It's
there's so much um there's so much that goes into it when it comes to the next 4 years, because I cannot, as a woman and a Jewish woman,
Mhm.
in any remote good conscience, go, yes, there's a good idea, Trump.
Yeah.
Just baseline. But then I just don't, it's I mean, maybe the lesser of two evils, or just, I mean, I wouldn't say don't vote, but
It seems like a lot of people still are, they see this thing just like we were talking about before with like the ironic douchebag or the ironic Nazi, is like they see this whole thing as a meme, like it's a haha, like he's really sticking it to those libs. It's like, okay, like it's been 4 years, can we talk serious now? Like this isn't just people being overly emotional, like and there have been plenty of people who have been overly emotional and petty about certain things, but like, you know, this is actually going to be really detrimental for everyone.
yeah, yeah. I mean, when Trump was elected the first time, um, my dad, who's like the happiest go luckiest dude in the world,
Mhm.
fell into like this kind of depressive state because you gotta remember his parents came to this country after the Holocaust.
Mhm.
This was like a beacon of hope
Yeah.
and freedom and an opportunity, and it was like everything that America had stood for was just
Yeah.
on its head. And I mean, I was very disheartened and obviously upset, but I mean, I threw up the next morning. But um I had never seen my dad like that, and I was just like, damn, there's something I'm missing here. And then when I thought about my grandparents and everything, it was like, okay, this makes sense. This is just from what I've read too, ideologically very similar to what they like got away from.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, I see now why you feel the way that you do. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't fix it, which is what sucked the most. I was like, I can't make it better. I can't go, it's gonna get better, because I don't know the future. And here we are. So
Well,
someone text.
I think the biggest thing that we can do is to have, um, even though understandably in all politics is emotional, like the people who say, well, just don't get emotional about it. Like, no, like you shouldn't be like overly emotional in the conversations that you have with people in the sense of like, telling them that they're idiots or evil. But like you should still emphasize what's at stake in not you, everybody,
Oh,
and
you know, the universal,
and that
yeah.
we're really playing with fire here, you know, and that we're a country that really is more susceptible to authoritarian, self-promoting strongmen than we thought we were. You know, like we like to say "rah rah America." You know, they had Hitler, they had Mussolini, they have their dictators or whatever. But you know, there's an incremental road to that.
Yeah.
You know, and you can have 4 years like Hitler was in power for, or Stalin or anybody was in power for a while before they started to like ratchet shit up. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, things are, people don't realize that the mystique surrounding the president, that he's a businessman, he's done all this great business stuff, like a lot of that was built with The Apprentice and his book, The Art of the Deal. Like
And
there was this
corruption and
character around
dysfunction.
Trump that was built, and he's a great self promoter. His businesses were largely failing. I know this has been talked about endlessly, but like people need to realize that it's like, do we reward a guy who has failed numerous times in businesses? And I know we love the American success story of rising from the ashes and second chances and stuff like that. But like, do we really give this guy another chance
I
running something this high stakes? No.
I still just remember the first, not the first, but one of the first commercials that like really stuck out to me. He was like, I got a small loan of $1 million. And I was like, can I have one? Can that be my stimulus check?
I get the sense that like
Which I still
in
haven't
the
gotten.
context of
Government, if you're listening,
I
I'm
guess in the
waiting.
context of real estate, a loan of $1 million probably is relatively small, but the fact that he said that he referred to it as a small loan is like, yeah,
They're like, I got a small loan of a video game for one of my cousins once. He said you can borrow it and then wanted it back. That
yeah.
was a small loan. Like,
It's a fine line to walk where like you see the daily kind of like ridiculousness in aspects of humor. Like humor and tragedy are closely affiliated with each other, right?
Very much so, yeah.
You have to at times feel like, oh my god, that really happened, that is ridiculous, but at the same time still like maintain the message of like, no, this all isn't just one giant comedy where it's like, oh, we'll see what happens, cliffhanger. No,
Yeah.
like, you have to actually intervene and do something here.
Yeah, it's like short of some type of revolution, there has to be small scale incremental moves forward,
Mhm.
much like I mean, even with the bad stuff that's happened in history, there were small incremental movements forward.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about last time, like rounding up people and things like that. Um, there has to be positive increments forward, or effectively, we're fucked.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean getting so worked up that you smash people on the head with bike locks or run people over with your car. We don't need Antifa shit or alt-right shit. Like this is the time to have conversations, find people who are like, you know, engaged and who
People that are different than you, people that think differently than you, have
yeah.
a conversation. Don't beat each other up. Like it sounds like you're talking to a couple preschoolers. Like, use your nice words. Don't hit each other. But
Yeah.
like, for real, a conversation is paramount to moving forward. Conversation and propulsion go together hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I don't know what can happen in the past because it's already happened. But imagine what could have changed had like the right conversation occurred. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like with the Waco siege, just to backtrack a few episodes. Something I recently learned actually was that David Koresh found out that the siege was coming because a reporter was on their way, got lost trying to find the compound, and asked someone who drove by, "Oh, I'm on my way to cover the siege that's about to happen. Can you show me where it is?" It was an insider from the compound. Imagine the conversation that could have happened between Koresh and the government instead of,
Mhm.
charge.
Yeah, it's kind of the classic example of people often go for catharsis instead of resolution. Like when they have the opportunity to, if somebody has been doing something like deeply immoral or even something that really irritates them, let's say,
Yeah.
like the dude who cooks haddock in the microwave at work, to keep it mild here. Instead of like going to the person like, hey, could you not do that, because it actually creates a scent that permeates the whole office, or like maybe you get to know the guy and you have opportunity to have that conversation. But what most people do is they bitch the person out because they get that good feeling of like, what are you, an idiot? Like just chewing somebody out is
Yeah,
like
vilifying that person for a
so
mistake.
yes, feels so gratifying to people that most people go that route, and it actually has no chance of helping the problem because you've now humiliated or pissed off the person, and now they're just going to dig in further, and it's going to escalate and become a bigger problem. So like, people,
They
please
become
be
the
a bigger
person.
person.
They become the person that brings Red Lobster on the plane.
Exactly. Exactly. People, please become the bigger person. Don't seek catharsis. Seek resolution and common ground, and
And
what?
eat fish in open areas.
Yes, eat fish in open areas.
That's just a life lesson right there. Like, if you need to eat fish, by all means, it's good for you. Go outside.
It is. It applies in all situations.
It
So that's
does.
pretty much all I've got tonight.
Yeah, I mean, this was a spur of the moment kind of podcast type deal, which was great because I was like, I miss talking.
Yeah, and I think we both got. I don't know. Maybe maybe it was more me. Got animated there. So I was
No,
getting
I mean, we were
reaction.
both. Yeah, no, I feel it. I got it.
Yeah.
I just had like a scent memory back to the plane, so I'm a little like right now. But
Yeah.
um, but no, we definitely both had that animation and that excitement of like getting into a topic, and that's when you know that something's working because it's a conversation that if it's one of those things that has it has a defined start, but there's really no defined end. One of us has to kind of be like, and we cut. um, and by us, I mean you, because this is your podcast. But speaking of stuff from us, there is going to be a vlog channel.
Yeah.
um,
When are you thinking of, do you have any idea of when you're going to start to schedule? Obviously, it's related to
yeah,
quarantine too, but
it is very quarantine uh, dependent, but as restrictions are slowly lifting, because a lot of what I want to do and am dragging you along for, so get excited, is outside, which makes it a lot easier to social distance and at the same time visit and view different things and make not assumptions, make arguments for and against, and different things that are just around here that have the potential to be talked about. And
spooky.
yeah, we, we we love a good spooky place, but there's also like because I live near the Bridgewater Triangle ish. I sent you the other day. I sent you that list of so that website of like the
Yes.
haunted.
Thank
Yeah,
you for reminding me. I did not actually. Could you send that again? It's possible
you
that I
were.
cleared that out when I was going through. I was deleting old text conversations. Can you send that again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. No, I can send that to you. I can do it right now. Look at technology, just doing things.
I get the feeling
Um,
that when we actually see each other in person, we're just gonna be entirely mute, not say a thing to each other because like anti-podcast.
I don't know about that. Like you and
Kidding.
I are both big.
But
We're both big talkers,
yeah.
so I don't know. Probably just gonna be like, yes, it's gonna be so spooky. It's gonna be awesome. Um,
This is the kind of stuff that I had always wanted to do in like high school and college, and it's
yeah,
other people are like, "What are you nuts? I just want to go to a bar. I don't want to go explore stuff."
yeah. I mean, like, I'll go to a bar if there's a good reason. Like, is there trivia? I like trivia. But like I would rather grab a camera and go, stomping around in the woods trying to find stuff. Cause like in the Bridgewater Triangle, there's Assonet State Forest or Freetown State Forest, and there's Assonet, and there's all this different stuff in Dighton, and there's a lot there. There's cult activity and whatnot, and it's something worth exploring. And and also just because where we live is very history laden.
Mhm.
You can't really walk around Massachusetts and be like, oh, nothing interesting happened here, because it did.
Yeah.
um and I think that that's like definitely worth exploring, both literally and figuratively, because I also like walking around in the woods and finding stuff. um
Definitely. I am really looking forward to this, and then we'll move over to Pripyat, Ukraine, Chernobyl.
yes, we'll have to wait till things calm down a little. And I swear to God, if anyone's on our flight to the Ukraine and they bring Red Lobster, they're answering to me. I'm not doing it for catharsis. It is a public service announcement.
Yes.
If I see anyone near
And
our gate,
I, aside from that, I don't even know if I want to take a flight to the Ukraine because haven't two planes gone down over the Ukraine over the last like 3 years, major incidents?
let's fly to England,
Yes.
right? Hop some trains
Yes.
and figure it out from
Seems
there.
better. Seems better.
Yeah, I feel like there's less margin for error.
Yeah.
If we do that. But oh my God, to explore Ukraine would be insanely cool. But
Actually, yeah, it would.
yeah, I mean
Aside
Europe
from
in
the war
general.
zone. Stay away from the war zone.
Well, yeah, I mean nothing says I'm totally cool like a Jewish woman with tattoos that denote that she's Jewish.
Not to
Phenomenal.
mention into the stories of Westerners that go into like war zones in foreign places that are highly questionable are generally not very good, unless We're just not hearing about all the people who it goes phenomenally well. And they
Well,
just,
if we were hearing about them, they probably would have come back.
well, maybe those don't make the news, and we only hear about the worst case scenarios, like Otto
Could be.
Warmbier in North Korea and the dude
With
with ISIS.
see, I would test the theory, but I have a lot in the future I'm really looking forward to as well.
Let's not test it.
Yeah, but we'll actually I was told by someone who's been there, because I want to go to Auschwitz and stuff. And I was told like, hey, wear long sleeves because I do have the memorial tattoo and whatnot, and it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Plus Poland's pretty cold most of the time, so.
Yeah, Poland just seems like it'd be cold. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by that. By the way, this will be a subject for another day, but I posted on LinkedIn about Unit 731, the book.
Yes.
It's a good book. It's a short one,
Yeah.
but fascinating. That'll be a topic for another day.
Yeah. I haven't read it in a while, but it's a great book, and yeah, now that actually my pile is gone, I shipped it back.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'll be rating yours for new stuff to read.
Yes, I have a growing pile of stuff that I've gone through, so I can ship that pile out now. I can ship
Great.
you a stack of books.
And then I can do unboxing videos. I'll be like, today on Tara gets stuff from Pat. It'll be like, like what is it on TikTok? Like you duet something or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it'll be like,
I know what you're talking about, but my
I don't know.
TikTok is somewhat bleak.
I downloaded TikTok because I've been very bored, and there is some funny stuff. There's a lot of stupid stuff there too, but there's some really cool DIY stuff. I've posted one TikTok.
Is it a little bit like Vine? Short
It
video?
is. It is. It's a little bit longer than Vine, and I think I said this, but when I had Vine, I made the popular page 2 whole times. So
Vine, this happens with most things that are fads or popular. Is I discover them like 6 years later, and I get super into them, and I'm just telling my friends like, "Oh man, this is so funny! You gotta check this out." They're like, "Dude, Vine, that
it's
was like
dead.
6 years ago." And
Yeah.
so I had in my era of Vine, I was just going through like having a grand old time watching all these old Vine videos, and oh man.
Vine was fun. TikTok is a lot different and more difficult, and like the only one that I posted was a time lapse of me drawing a tattoo, and then I was like, well, that was exciting. Moving on. Like it just wasn't for me, but like I don't know, as far as, like social media and stuff goes, like I'm making a concerted effort now to use social media either for something or to keep up on something. Like I'm using LinkedIn more than I'm using Facebook.
Yeah.
Which is important. I'm trying to remember that I am not I'm not in my early 20s anymore. Like I need to start acting like an adult.
Well, it shows growth, which is good, and it's not just you personally. I think society in general is going through this transition with their social networks. Like
Yeah.
society was adopting to this new world of like online networks, and what does that mean? And obviously, we were misusing it in a lot of ways, and a bunch of people continue to and will continue to misuse it. But a lot of us have grown up in the sense of like, oh, like how can we actually use these assets constructively and collaborate with each other and create cool shit together. And so
like as far as TikTok goes, one thing I've learned from it is that number one, dances are getting stupider and stupider and stupider, but because that's a big thing there. But there's also really cool like art techniques and things like that I've seen that I'm like, all right, I have nothing else to do, I want to try that. But I use Snapchat to keep snap streaks with people because I'm that person, but also to like go, okay, yeah, I appeared on Man Be Mob tonight, you should listen to it because it's awesome. And like do the same thing with Instagram. I think I'm most active on Instagram because I like capturing moments and then going like, this is something I want to preserve.
Yeah.
Also,
I'm
like,
pretty active on it as well, and I know that I use it incorrectly often, and people have
you
told
do fine. I checked.
me. Okay, thank you. I was
'Cause,
not
like,
just fishing for a compliment, by the way. People have actually told me, they're like, dude.
oh no, if you were screwing stuff up, I'd be like, hey, let's go over hashtags. Let's just talk about it for a minute.
Whatever
No, but
you get into.
no, but you're doing fine. But I've thought about, YouTube for a wicked long time, and I think that not only this podcast, but these conversations that we have where we go back and forth about stuff that nobody else wants to talk to me about, like going and doing a deep dive into something that might be haunted,
Mhm.
or that has, like, we were talking about Medfield State Hospital, that has like a history to it and where Shutter Island was filmed, and it's like someone else wants to go, that is a reason for me to pick up a camera and go figure it out. And even if, I come back with nothing other than a really cool memory and a video,
Mhm.
I'm happy.
I'll grab my Super 8, by the way.
Oh, good. Should we just, like,
Yeah, I will.
yeah, we could take photos with one of those things where we gotta go like under a curtain and then like poof.
Can you imagine bringing, like, going into some old area and having like a literal flashbulb style camera? You'd be like, what the hell is
Legit.
wrong with you? That makes
Oh
me,
my.
okay. This is the last story. That reminded me of, in college I was in a fraternity,
Yeah,
and
I was not, because I'm a woman. Continue.
we were an open and inclusive fraternity. I like to think we
Was
had
it?
we had, what's the term? It was like, um, honorary brothers. We had some honorary brothers that
Oh,
were actually women in college.
was it like for something specific, or was it just a?
Yeah, it was like they had done something really awesome. It wasn't just like, hey, they could chug a,
Yeah,
it's,
because if that was the basis of getting in, I wouldn't get in.
um, it was, they had done something cool. I don't remember exactly the specific
There's
example.
honors fraternities and stuff in grad school that, like, I'm looking at just for like the networking. But anyway,
Yeah, there are different types. It's not
yeah,
just the social ones.
they're just
Um,
called fraternities because the male patriarchy.
yeah, exactly. We were the embodiment of the patriarchy.
Yes, clearly.
So there was, this was a year or so after I had graduated. I was invited back to a reunion that they were having at, this was in like Maine, New Hampshire area.
Mhm.
Here, do you know where Mount Moosilauke is?
I do.
Okay, so it was kind of near there. There's an Airbnb,
That's a
and
nice area.
we went on a day hike on Saturday. Like, we all got there Friday night. We went on a day hike Saturday. Moosilauke. We pretty much knew nothing about it. I was the lead car. I think there was a caravan of like two or three cars, and I just sort of like picked a random trailhead, and like, all right, let's just go to it. This is where it says to go. So this was in, I want to say April, it might have been early May. Right in the
Chilly.
parking lot, snow. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
if there's snow here, there's snow up there. So the whole trail was snow and ice, and it was like extremely treacherous. Uh, there was probably about 30 of us, different,
Yeah.
ranging from freshmen to like just recently graduated,
Yeah.
and I was in charge of like, half the guys dropped acid. There was an already treacherous trail. They dropped acid, and they had beers in their hands as they were going up. So they had,
Oh,
one hand occupied by a beer. They they were high on acid, and they were dressed in clothes that did not match the environment whatsoever. Like, one of the guys, Alec, was actually dressed for some reason in business casual clothing. Like, he
as
was
one
going to
does
a
when they go. Oh my
in
god.
March, as we were looking at it, and we were all cracking up about it, but we were like, dude, why did you bring this outfit with you today? What did you think we were doing?
Yeah. Like,
Going to a job fair? This is like a hike. Oh man.
I
And
mean,
so
I.
we went by at one point, a couple that was coming down, and they were dressed like they were on the Appalachian Trail, and they look at Alec, and they were just, must have been like, he's wearing a frat T-shirt underneath some business casual stuff, and like dress shoes, and holding a PBR. and they must have just been like, they're all
Oh my
gonna die.
god.
It's kind of a miracle that we survived.
Alec, I don't know you, but dude.
I know. Well,
Like,
I was actually like, fuck. Not only do I like, I basically have to not only keep out watch for myself here, but make sure that 30 dudes don't kill themselves. So that was a
I
little
mean,
stressful.
I've been hiking since I was a little kid, and last story, promise.
Hey, if I get one, you get one.
Okay, fine. That's what we should call the vlog. Last story, I promise. But that's a good one. Write that down. I grew up going to like the AMC huts. The Appalachian Mountain Club has this hut system, and it's really, really cool. It's bunk style housing. It's a very hiker inclusive.
It's kind of like at the Lake of the Clouds. I know that's
Yeah, Lake to the Clouds is one of them. I've been to all but one, which is Carter Notch, because that one is like out in the middle of nowhere and there's no hut crew. But if you haven't heard of it, go look it up. It's a lot of fun. I can't wait to go back to them. But one of the things they would do every night was ghost stories. And it was legit stuff that had happened in the mountains. Now, I have summited Mount Washington. My next time that I go, I get a patch for having done it 12 times. Mm-hmm. And thank you.
12 times, that's actually impressive.
Over the course of 28 years, though.
Okay.
Also, to be fair, there was a lot of complaining when I was younger. There was a lot of, why are we doing this? Is still, I want to go home. You know, like it wasn't pretty, but we did it. But the amount of haunted and like true experiences and like catastrophic deaths and spirits that still reside in the area, especially of Lakes of the Clouds, that like I've heard firsthand accounts about. I'm like, I want to see that shit. You know, I want to get that scared at that. You know, and it's something that's just like, it's just so fascinating to me because on the topic of religion, I don't know where you go when you die. I have not been there and do not want to find out for quite a while. There it is. But I like to go on the assumption that your energy or spirit or something is still around. And that's like what makes the spooky places spooky. Mm-hmm. And I want to go investigate that. Not for the sake of going, oh my God, look what I found, but just kind of like, this is a legit thing that happened. Mm-hmm. And I'm here and I see it and I'm experiencing it and I can hear someone outside screaming about something. Not in a bad way. The house across the street from me, I literally. Right now? Yeah.
I thought that was a part of your story.
Nope, I just noticed it. The house across the street from me, I have lived here 5 years. I literally cannot tell you how many people live in that house accurately. I have no idea. There's so many people in and out of there constantly. I'm like, you're here a lot. Do you live here? I don't know. And it's like
spooky adventure is just going to be across the street.
I went over there once. It was enough to actually help them catch their turtle. Which sounds ridiculous, but they had like a huge turtle that was just not having it, and they were like, "We need people."
About, like a snapping turtle, or
it was like a pet turtle type.
It wasn't deal. Like one. Have you seen a snapping turtle before, where their necks can go out and like?
Yeah, I have. It
wasn't one of those.
No, I picked up a baby snapping turtle once by the tail because they can't reach all the way around.
Yeah.
And it was adorable, but then I was also like, there's a baby, there's a mom somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know how many people live across the street from me. All I know is that I think they're having some type of party.
So let's hope that that's a scream of delight.
If fireworks start this early, I'm going to be so pissed. That's the thing about living down here. It's like vacation land, so there's fireworks all the time. My poor dogs. Like, you wonder why they're anxious? Because stuff explodes randomly.
Yeah, her dogs are quite anxious at fireworks.
They you know, and like everybody on this street pretty much has dogs. So you would think, common sense would say, hey, this is also the middle of nowhere. We can set these off wherever we want. Let's maybe get away from the houses. No?
Nope. Common sense ain't common.
Amen, sir. Amen.
That'll be the sub blog.
I like that. The last story, I promise. Common sense ain't common.
Right on. All right. Well, any last words?
Don't do drugs unless it's weed.
Good word. Oh, I'm taking a course on Saturday. It's there you go.
Nice.
Yeah. So it should be cool.
I'm
Not that
so proud of you.
I get like a certificate or something, but it's one of those BS certificates. So okay,
Hey,
that truly was the last thing. So
it counts. It counts. Hopefully they have like a superimposed like pot leaf on it or something.
yeah.
I'll keep a good thought for you.
Nice. Maybe some watermarks.
That would
Shiny
be
stuff. I'm like a seagull. I like shiny stuff. So
aren't we all? But yeah, no, as always, thank you for having me. I always have a great time and I can't wait to come back.
of course, you're always
and
welcome back.
I appreciate that. And to answer your question earlier, I think towards the end of May is when I want to try for us to head out and film our first thing.
Okay.
Sound good?
Not that I have anything to do. I'll be sitting here.
Yeah. I'll be either sitting here or out by the fire pit because there's a lot of downed wood that needs to go away. But yeah, no, that's what I'm hoping for right now is to by the end of May we'll start filming.
Awesome. Have a good night, Sarah.
Hey, you too, Pat.